fully appreciate the magnitude of whatever budgetary challenges we face unless you know the cost of the war. That cost will be known to us later on.
And good afternoon. I'm Holly Thompson. We are going to break away for local news now, but if military action develops overseas, we will go back to network. We will keep you posted of the very latest information out there. Now we begin our Channel 4 News at noon. Around the world, there is widespread criticism of the U.S. attack on Iraq. The White House says while President Bush respects the opinion of critics, he remains very focused on disarming Saddam Hussein. Beverly Kirk joins us now with the very latest from the White House.
President Bush this morning in the Oval Office, meeting with Vice President Cheney, CIA Director George Tenet, and Chief of Staff Andrew Card, and hearing the latest on military action in Iraq. The administration is still trying to determine whether Saddam Hussein survived the initial attack and whether a videotape of him is authentic. On Capitol Hill, lawmakers are also focused on the war.
In view of the military action taking place in Iraq, the Senate will consider today a resolution of support for President Bush and the troops.
The president has made the decision. We support our men and women in uniform and their families, and we are now looking to the next stage.
At the New York Stock Exchange, a moment of silence to honor those fighting.
Stop Bush!
But in the streets of Washington, anti-war demonstrators protested during the morning rush, even blocking traffic on a bridge. Overseas, harsh criticism from Russian President Vladimir Putin, who called the attack a great political mistake. France's Jacques Chirac says the conflict will have serious consequences for the future. As expected, support came from Great Britain.
What we say is that the number of Iraqi lives saved by this military action will far exceed the number of people who sadly will be killed.
The White House says President Bush understands the opposition, but remains undeterred in his commitment to liberating the Iraqi people from Saddam's control.
And we are now going back to network coverage. Skies over Baghdad are lighting up.
Go ahead, Peter, if you can hear me. This is Tom Brokaw.
We are again just standing here on our balcony, trying to figure out what is going on. But clearly a nervous city. 15 minutes ago, air raid warnings. Now 5 minutes of anti-aircraft fire in the distance. We can see explosions of anti-aircraft weapons in the sky.
Hello, NBC, do you hear us? Do you hear us here in Baghdad? Do you hear us here in Baghdad? We are not hearing anything.
Yes, we do hear you in Baghdad.
All right, great.
Just continue, Peter Arnett.
Yeah, Tom, that was my producer, Charles Poe, a very brave young man with my team here. As I said earlier, 15 minutes ago, warning sirens in Baghdad. Just for the last 5 minutes, heavy anti-aircraft fire into the sky. Right now, in the distance, we cannot hear the explosions, but we can't hear the explosions, but we can see multiple anti-aircraft explosions, rockets going into the sky. We don't hear the sounds of planes. But hang on a minute, I'll check with my cameraman.
All right, as you do that, Peter, I'm going to get an assessment of where some of our expert analysts are here, General Michael Short and Monty Miggs, and others. That appears to be an explosion that has occurred in the distance on the horizon. I'm not sure the direction there in Baghdad. It's a sprawling city. About 5 million people live in Baghdad. Quite an elegant city at one time, and portions of it remain that. It's always a surprise to a lot of outsiders. It's the most developed middle class in the Middle East, probably. And the most striking architecture, of course, are all the presidential palaces and the monuments that Saddam Hussein has had erected to himself. Although in recent years, he's also erected what he called the mother of all mosques, as he tries to reach out to the faithful in the Middle East and portray himself as a much more religious man. When he appeared this morning on television in Iraq, he referred to the Quran and morning prayers, but he is widely seen, even in that part of the world, as a very secular figure. He uses religion only when it's to his advantage. Okay, let's hear Peter Arnett again.
Again, multiple anti-aircraft bursts sweeping. Now we hear the sounds of aircraft low over the city. Aircraft low over the city. Big explosion near the presidential palace. You will hear those explosions now. It looks somewhere near the information ministry. Explosion. Much smoke in the sky. Much smoke in the sky. It is clear the major attack is beginning on the city. One building seems completely destroyed by a bomb. Again, the smoke rising. And another explosion we're hearing. We are here opposite the presidential palace. This is 5 to 6 miles of Tigris riverfront, at which there are, we are under the impression, 5 to 10 targets. But right now, the one we do see.
All right, as we listen to Peter Arnett reporting directly from a hotel room in Baghdad, we will tell you that at the Pentagon and at the White House, this is the beginning of a campaign of shock and awe, an unparalleled air attack designed to do great damage to the leadership of Iraq, also to have an enormous psychological effect, not only on the military, but on the people of Iraq, to know that they cannot win this war. Ground troops, if they're not already moving, will be shortly from the south and Kuwait up toward Baghdad. Other troops could be arriving from the north. NBC's Jim Miklashevsky at the Pentagon, what can you tell us?
Well, Tom, U.S. military officials do tell NBC News that this is the beginning of the shock and awe campaign. According to one official, this is going to be the entire 9 yards. The initial plan for shock and awe had called for some 600 cruise missiles, thousands of bombs, all aimed at military leadership targets, military infrastructure targets in and around Baghdad in the first 24 to 48 hours of any air war. It's unclear as to how soon the U.S. military would start moving on the ground. We did see earlier artillery barrages across the Kuwaiti border aimed at the 51st Mechanized Division of the Iraqi military in southern Iraq, thought to be the toughest of the regular Iraqi military troops in the south. The war is on at full bore at this time, and this bombing is expected to continue, Tom, for several hours.
All right, thanks very much, NBC Jim Miklashevsky. As we continue to look at these live pictures, the consortium of television agencies in Baghdad and Al Jazeera. You'll see that Arabic logo in the upper right-hand corner. That is the Arabic news channel service out of Qatar. They have more correspondents and more cameras there than anyone. Smoke around some of the buildings, but the striking thing remains that the power still is on in Baghdad. There was a lot of talk about a so-called E-bomb that would immobilize the electrical grid for Iraq and Baghdad. Some question about whether that will be used, because the United States, if and when it takes ownership of that country, will have to be able to deal with power and does not want to do any more damage than necessary to get Saddam Hussein to disarm his country and to leave. Let's go back to Peter Arnett now in Baghdad. Peter?
Okay, Tom, for the last 5 minutes, calm in the city. There's no anti-aircraft fire we can see, but there were 2 large explosions within a mile of us. One, a large building near the information ministry. It could be the TV center. We can't quite identify it yet. Another one opposite us in the presidential palace area. I think it may be one of the intelligence department buildings. We are not sure. There was 10 minutes of intense anti-aircraft fire. We heard the sound of low-flying planes. And there was a lot of activity way to the west of us, where there could have been other bombing. But as far as Baghdad is concerned, right downtown, 2 buildings destroyed so far, Tom.
And Peter, what about anti-aircraft fire, air defense systems within the center of Baghdad? Were they activated as well?
Interestingly enough, no, Tom. We basically saw the anti-aircraft essentially to the west and to the northwest. In terms of the actual center of Baghdad, where we are, we did not notice much activity. Now, on the other hand, I just haven't literally seen many anti-aircraft weapons in this area. We presume that we're around. But I must say that in the first Gulf War, there was far greater use of anti-aircraft than we have tonight. It was just this total spectacular display in the morning of January 16, 1991. Much less effort here tonight. Minimal compared to what it was in 1991. Now, whether the Iraqis feel that this has not been the main attack and whether these planes coming in, presumably stealth bombers coming in at great speed, hitting only 2 targets in the city may not have been enough.
All right, you have been listening to Peter Arnett. We are now going to go live and talk with Channel 4's Ben Singer, who has been with Camp Thunder, the 101st. He is joining us by phone. Ben, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Go ahead.
Ben, go ahead and describe whatever you can without giving anything away. I understand you are with the troops on their way to Iraq, correct?
Right. Well, that was the plan for today. As far as travel, it's sort of been suspended at this point as far as the troops at Camp Thunder are concerned because of the missiles that were fired into Kuwait today. We're happy to report, and they want us to report, that no members of the 159th Aviation Brigade were hurt today. So they want to make sure that message gets out to their family. Though there was at least one missile that was targeted to hit this camp. So a Patriot missile on site here did go up and destroy it in the air, causing a very loud explosion today, causing everybody to run to the survivability trenches and don their gas masks and other protective chemical gear. So definitely some tense moments around here today.
Oh, I can imagine. Describe what you can hear or see from your vantage point there.
You know, as far as I know, we're probably about an hour from the border, more west of Kuwait City, and we'll hear some of the low rumblings of what's happening. And I think it's become apparent here that we're starting to talk about the dark, but we really can't see it from here. It is nightfall. I'm sure you just saw pictures of. You can't see it going on. You can hear very low rumblings, probably likely from coming up.
And obviously, we are having some technical difficulties. We've been talking with Channel 4's Ben Singer, who's been joining us by phone from Camp Thunder. Some good news for the folks talking about the 101st there from Fort Campbell. He is saying, happy to report that no members of the 159th Brigade, there with the 9th Helicopter Battalion, have been injured. So some good news to report for our folks there at Fort Campbell. Now we're going to go back to network.
A lot of activity going on.
Well, if the ground forces kicked off about the same time, that's going to be moving very quickly, and the embedded reporters are going to be buttoned up in tracks moving. We won't hear from them for a while.
Okay, let's. NBC's David Gregory is at the White House, has some additional information for us. David.
Tom, senior officials telling us, even as we look at these pictures, they are saying, for the purpose of context, that when Secretary Rumsfeld said that this period of attack would be of a scope and size that has not been seen before, that even the beginnings of this kind of assault that we're seeing unfold may get larger and larger still as it continues to unfold, that there is an acceleration of battle plans that they have experienced since the original intelligence popped up that led to the first strike. There's also, officials are telling us, a good deal of dissemination of information still going on, of leaflets, and a good deal of assessment still going on from the original strike, the first surgical strike on Baghdad. Officials also saying that some of what we're seeing in terms of the ground campaign may still be on the level of softening of targets rather than the full-scale ground assault that we may see later on.
All right, thank you very much, David Gregory. The bombing appears to be focused, I'm told, on the Al-Qarq district, home of the Iraqi elite, where the Presidential Secretariat, the Special Security Organization headquarters, the Revolutionary Command Council, the Republican Palace, the Underground National Command Center, Council of Ministers, residences, and offices of all the key Iraqi leadership are located. David Kay, who was a UN weapons inspector in Baghdad and now an NBC News analyst, is very familiar with that neighborhood.
This is the upscale area of Baghdad, a rare concentration of everything in a scope of probably no more than maybe 15 square miles, but you've got one huge Republican palace, which is the oldest palace actually in Baghdad in terms of its foundations, but you've got intelligence headquarters there. The interesting thing for Peter, of course, from the roof of the Palestine Hotel, if he has anyone there, he has a great view of that area. You overlook it from the Palestine Hotel. This will be visible in terms of shock and awe. It'll be visible to all of Baghdad. There will be no doubt. This is a quarter of Baghdad that even the Iraqi minders I had didn't like to go into. You could see the hair stand up to them. They know this is where the power was centered in some of the worst of the terrorist intelligence and police functions.
All right, as a reminder, it's 9:20 p.m. in Baghdad. It's now about 18 hours after the initial strike against the so-called target of opportunity, the leadership bunker from last night that got all of our attention very quickly. That was based on a report from George Tenet, the head of the CIA, who went to the president and said, we think that we've identified a place where they're all gathering and maybe gathering for morning prayers as well as a leadership meeting. The president signed the authorization to conduct the strike. That occurred last night. The president went on the air and said, Operation Iraqi Freedom is now officially underway, but in a much different fashion than anyone expected. The war began not with a bang, but with exclamations of surprise. This appears to be now back to square one, the original battle plan, shock and awe in the skies over Iraq, the capital, and in the area south of there, defense installations, oil fields, places where the regular army has dug in, and if Donald Rumsfeld has its way, will turn in its weapons and turn its back on Saddam Hussein and become part of a new Iraq. Not much that we can do except to continue to bring you these pictures and wait for what we expect will be a next wave of attacks on the capital city. But we don't know exactly when that will occur because it's a closely integrated battle plan. Peter Arnett?
Quiet. Otherwise, no traffic at all on the streets. A few people walking around in front of their houses. Another large explosion in the outskirts of Baghdad, probably to the northwest. Very loud explosion. Followed by intermittent anti-aircraft fire.
Out in the direction of the airport, Peter?
Coming in. This follows the pattern of the first Gulf War, where about every 10 to 15 minutes in the initial phase, there were waves of missiles or planes hitting the city. 4 or 5 minutes of attack, 10, 15 minutes delay, increase, further attacks, and more delay.
Peter, northwest of...
As I said earlier, the anti-aircraft response from Baghdad much more limited than in the first Gulf War, much more limited.
Beyond the airport, when you say northwest of the city?
It is? I'm not sure. Are you sure? No, I'm not interested.
All right, we're joined now by retired Air Force General Michael Short, who ran the bombing campaign against Kosovo. General, what do we think here? Do we have some Tomahawks that are landing in the Baghdad area?
Tom, I think a laydown of air-launched cruise missiles, 2,000-pound warhead, penetrating capability, extraordinary explosive capability, launched from B-52s, perhaps as many as 10 from the United Kingdom, and then sea-launched missiles from submarines and destroyers and cruisers, probably a couple of British submarines in both the Gulf and the Red Sea. And I think in there in that mix, B-2s, I would guess as many as 5 or 6 with 16 warheads apiece, global positioning system guidance, and the 117s that we saw last night, 2 over the target of opportunity. I'm guessing as many as 10 tonight. And what they'll want to do is get those 117s in, back out again, turn them and bring them in again. That's why we started just after darkness. We'd like to get 2 solid waves of stealth technology overhead tonight.
You're a lot more comfortable with this than you were with last night when it was beginning to get daylight.
Tom, I am. This is my business. Hitting one thing and seeing what happens was a great move. It was a brilliant move, but this is what's going to get their attention. They will all understand this one. A lot of them didn't know that thing happened last night.
We're told that a huge plume of smoke could be seen from the west bank of the Tigris in central Baghdad, but it could not be determined what had been hit, but that would be in the area of one of the presidential palaces.
That's in the area of one of the presidential palaces, but it also has an intelligence service building almost adjacent to it. So they may well have taken that out.
All right. We're also told that F-14 and F-18 jets have taken off from the Teddy Roosevelt.
Absolutely.
That's a principal carrier. Peter Arnett in Baghdad.
Several other targets, including the Iraqi television station system, which was a target in the first Gulf War. The Information Ministry was not a target in the second Gulf War. In the first Gulf War, this time around, has been very clear that many international media have been working out of there, and we were working in the Information Ministry early today but we cannot confirm that that is the target of the first bomb. It is certainly very near that
Peter, what about
beyond that?
Go ahead.
Yep, back to you, Tom.
No, I was just going to say, are you seeing any damage to roadways and bridges? Those were targets in the past, but they're picking out, it sounds to me, like specific buildings.
Clearly specific buildings. We have seen 2 that have been destroyed. We've heard explosions in 2 or 3 other areas. The presidential palace itself remains intact. One building in the presidential compound has been destroyed. We did hear a major explosion to the south, to the southwest of that building. We can't eyeball it here from here. And clearly another one of the command and control structures. Clearly many targets to the western edge of the city because there was enormous anti-aircraft fire earlier, away in the distance. Beyond that, there are no other targets. The Defense Ministry intact, communication centers on the east side of the river where we are so far unhit. So you don't have a similar pattern to the first Gulf War. Clearly they, not at this point, but of course this is just the beginning of what this promises to be, of course, a huge bombing campaign, Tom.
And General Michael Short, who is here with us, how does it work? They lay down the cruise missiles, the Tomahawks, and then the tacticals come in behind that?
Tom, I think cruise missiles, again, air-launched and sea-launched to take out his eyes, to blind the Iraqi air defense system so they cannot respond to either stealth assets or conventional assets. Then rapidly after that, stealth assets, probably redundancy on some of the radars. As an air commander, I'd want to put a couple of rounds on each of the radars that I was most concerned about on their defensive systems. Then with stealth in and back out, then I put in conventional assets, believing I've beaten them down enough that I can put aluminum airplanes overhead Baghdad.
All right, let's go to NBC. Jim Miklashevsky at the Pentagon, who has some more on just what we've been talking about here. Jim?
Tom, U.S. government officials are now describing a somewhat different plan than the huge, massive bombardment of Baghdad in what they would call the shock and awe campaign. That was the original campaign underway, and I guess it could be best described perhaps as shock and pause. It was suggested to us that there may be waves of airstrikes now that are more incremental, aimed at specific leadership targets. As Peter Arnett described the areas being struck in this latest wave of airstrikes from U.S. warplanes and missiles, those are aimed at the Baghdad elite and leadership targets. According to officials, the bombing last night aimed at this bunker that supposedly contained Saddam Hussein and senior members of his regime. That was a very direct message aimed at Saddam Hussein. That was followed up today by messages from both Secretary of Defense Rumsfeld and Ari Fleischer during their briefings here in Washington. What's interesting about those briefings is that they are beamed into Iraq via airborne radio broadcasts through military aircraft, and the message from both of them today was very strong. Essentially, give up while you've got the chance. Take down Saddam Hussein and avoid an all-out war. This is these airstrikes are apparently designed now to reinforce that latest message. Meanwhile, still no indication that despite the artillery barrages being aimed across the border at the 51st Mechanized Unit in southern Iraq, that any of those ground troops have actually begun to move into the country of Iraq. Tom?
All right, thanks very much, NBC. Jim Miklashevsky. Kelly O'Donnell, who is at CENTCOM, the Central Command Headquarters in Qatar, is reporting the sources there are saying this may be going on for a period of unknown time, but the assault that Secretary Rumsfeld described earlier as a, quote, force, scope, and scale that has not been seen before will be unmistakable, and this is not yet it. So the battlefield plan still is unfolding. The exact dimensions of it are still not entirely clear to us. General Monty Meigs has been thinking a lot about shock and awe as a battlefield strategy and as a concept for the wars of the 21st century. General?
Well, I think we got to be careful with words like huge. Remember, what I think we're about here is using a lot of very small strikes to take out very specific pieces of the system in which the cumulative effect is devastating to the enemy's ability in any way to react or control his forces. And that's when his will starts to deteriorate. And so it's not a big bang type of attack. From my assessment of it, it's more a series of small bangs that crescendo, and then everything becomes paralyzed and the enemy starts to get frantic.
All right, we're going to take a look at the tape that we saw earlier from Baghdad. And I'm going to ask General Short to join in on this as well. In 1991, there was an awful lot of just filling the sky with anti-aircraft stuff. They didn't know quite what they were shooting at. They were just filling it up. Is that what it looks like here as well?
It does to me, Tom. This is the hope that we'll put enough lead in the sky and someone will fly through it. I doubt that much of this is guided, because to guide it, you've got to turn your radar on, and to turn your radar on in Baghdad today is to die, because there are F-16s and F-18s with a HARM anti-radiation missile waiting for someone to turn their radars on.
And back to what General Meigs was just talking about, shock and awe, surgical strikes, first stage. Take a look, see what happens with the military command structure. It also sends a message to the Iraqi people. And they get a response, not just militarily, but maybe politically within the command structure, right?
That's right. And I think actually Secretary Rumsfeld's presentation today, given the way that was paced and focused directly as if he was talking to the Iraqi people, wouldn't surprise me if it was up on commando solo and being pumped through all those one-frequency radios as a part of this thing.
I think we're sending the message, clearly, we can hit whatever we want to hit, whenever we want to hit it. This is not something where we can only come at you for 2 hours. We'll only be here at night. I expect to see us bombing in the daytime after the first night of attacks. And as General Meigs said, we will be selective. But the overall impact, after about 24 hours, they've got to look around and say, a lot of things that were dear to us are gone, and we can do nothing about it.
And at the same time, they're hearing in Arabic language on those one-frequency radios. And when I've been in Baghdad, a lot of people do have shortwave radios as well. They're hearing the BBC and the Voice of America and other outlets. And they're realizing that this time there is no exit strategy for it.
Exactly. This isn't going to stop until you cause it to stop by removing your leadership.
And the thing we often forget about these societies, the word gets around the street very, very, very quickly. We saw that in Bosnia.
But the fact is that in this case, the people of Iraq, the general rank and file, ordinary people, have been powerless to deal with him, because he is so tightly surrounded by his standards, very sophisticated security apparatus.
But I think Rumsfeld spoke to them when he said, don't go to work, stay in your houses. We're not after you, we're after leadership. And we're not going to bomb areas where we have large domestic populations. My guess is there will be some targets in heavily populated areas that we will choose not to strike, although they would be of value because of the risk of arming civilians.
We were just watching some more explosions there. This is live pictures both from NBC and Al Jazeera. Buildings in Baghdad going up as the attack continues. These Tomahawk missiles are really extraordinary weapons.
They are.
They'd make a right turn at the corner that they want to make a right turn at, go up a little higher, then go down lower, and then just drop down.
Exactly.
And they become an unexpected and very violent visitor.
Yes, and the same thing with the air-launched cruise missile.
How much better are they now than they were 10 years ago, the Tomahawks?
Tom, to me, the biggest thing is they now have the global positioning system in it. The Navy has an option to shoot a 1,000-pound unitary round or the cluster bombs that you and I discussed earlier. So they have a variety of targets they can strike. In the past, they had some trouble with hardened targets, not now with a 1,000-pound penetrator. And the GPS guidance puts them right where they want to be.
And what about the capacity of the Iraqis to defend against an incoming Tomahawk?
No question. You can shoot it down with AAA because they are visible. They are not supersonic, and you can to some degree predict the routes. So I think we will lose some to AAA. There's no question about that.
All right, that's a launch of a Tomahawk that we just watched there. That's how they take off. They fly.
All right, we're going to continue to watch pictures, the network coverage there of the bombings going on now in Baghdad overseas. But we are going to talk with Channel 4's Ben Singer, who is again joining us by phone from somewhere in Kuwait. Ben, can you hear me?
Yes, I can, Holly.
Now, did I hear you correct a little earlier? You said you were about 1 hour from the Iraqi border, and it sounded like your unit was not moving. Is that correct?
That is correct. That is due to some missiles that were fired into Kuwait earlier today. Part of the group that I'm with has planned to move a bit farther north, possibly even cross the border today, but plans have been sort of suspended as of right now. They're not really sure how safe it is out there, and of course they're letting the air attack take its course and kind of see what's left after that.
Well, can you kind of describe what you and the troops are going through right now? Are you wearing your chemical suits or your gas masks?
We are. It's certainly been a very tense day as far as that is concerned. There have been several warnings for us to go in. The call is called lightning. Someone from brigade will call out lightning, and everyone is expected to don their chemical masks in 9 seconds or less and run to the survivability trenches and put on these chemical suits that are lined with charcoal so they can prevent from or protect from nuclear, biological, or chemical weapons that may be any warheads coming in. And we only saw one explode sort of about 15 kilometers away from us today. It was headed here, and a Patriot missile that is based at Camp Thunder did destroy it, but there were several other alerts after that, probably about 6. And we're talking about the middle of the day here in this heavy gear, sitting in trenches with gas masks on. It's extremely hot. It was, quite frankly, extremely uncomfortable. So I know a lot of us are expected to, we're still donning the suits, not our masks in particular, but everyone will head to bed with this chemical gear on tonight, just not quite sure about when the next missile might be flying this way.
Ben, I can imagine this is obviously a very tense time for you and the troops there. What is the mood among the soldiers?
Well, I think there's a little bit of disappointment because there were plans to get underway with certain things today, and it was really sort of a setback. You know, for a lot of the people, you know, they train to do these sort of things all the time. So a lot of the soldiers, per se, weren't necessarily fazed by it. You know, a few did care to share with me that they were a little concerned about any chemicals that may be flying this way, but the reports have come back negative as far as that is concerned. So really everybody's just exhausted. I mean, we're walking around with all this extra gear, especially in the middle of the day like it was hours ago. It's just not an easy thing to do.
Now, I want to remind the folks at home again, Ben Singer is with Camp Thunder, the 9th Helicopter Battalion of the 159th Brigade. Ben, how isolated, though, are you as far as hearing about what's happening, what's going on around you?
Actually, there is one tent, the command tent here at Camp Thunder, that does have access to TV of some kind. I believe they're watching a cable news broadcast. So really, ironically, they're sort of getting their information from cable news right now and then sort of filtering it down the ranks. And they're getting a little bit from other aspects or other leaders in the Army as well. But really, that's really the only outlet. And then everyone has access to that. It's only the higher-ups, the colonels and the captains who are kind of in charge of the brigades here. So really, the average soldier just has to kind of go on blind faith that they're being listened to do the right thing.
Ben, I know that earlier when we were talking, you said you did have some good news, actually great news to report, and that is that no members of the 159th Brigade have been injured. Are you hearing if there have been any American casualties?
We haven't heard, thankfully, we haven't heard anything of that sort so far, and people really want us to relay that message to all the folks back at home, especially the family members sitting up there at Fort Campbell, because these soldiers have not been able, many of the soldiers that I'm with have moved from camp to camp to camp, so they have not, many of them have not called home and told their loved ones how they're doing or even been able to check in. A few of them are starting to receive mail right now, but they're really sort of cut off from the rest of the world, so they wanted to make sure we tell our families that they're okay and they're, I guess, as good a spirits as can be expected in a time like this.
And Ben, we know this latest round of attacks began probably, I guess, about 30, 40 minutes ago. And by the people here, military officials, it's being called the shock and awe campaign, basically an overwhelming military strategy to finally get it underway and be bombing both Baghdad and other strategic sites there throughout the country of Iraq. But what are you hearing? Anything in that nature about any other attacks or any news at all?
Not specifically. Really, all that we've got to go on right now, besides the fact that we're aware that the air attack has started, we really just hear low rumblings in the distance, and actually you can feel it through the ground as you're just walking around some of the strategic hits that have been going on. We understand that some of the fire is coming from the Persian Gulf, perhaps from naval ships, and one soldier was describing it to me how large artillery that comes off the ship there, some of these missiles or whatever they're firing are as big as maybe a Volkswagen, Bug car. I think he was probably exaggerating a little bit, but he's trying to say that, we shouldn't be surprised that we can hear that sort of action from this far away.
Yeah, we are being told that apparently they're planning to use 600 cruise missiles, thousands of bombs. We know that F-14, F-18 jets have apparently been taking off from the USS Theodore Roosevelt there in the eastern Mediterranean. Also, B-2s and F-117s being used right now. Ben, do you have any news or any word as far as when your specific group might be planning to move out? I mean, are we talking within hours or another day?
It's really sort of, everything changes by the hour, if that's fair to say. I think at this point, they do have some crew members interested in setting up a fueling station for the Black Hawk and Chinook helicopters. That's, of course, essential to what the 101st does, the air assault, moving troops around. So really, that's one of their concerns, is getting that process underway. But there's really no word about when that might happen right now. I think, it's my guess anyway, that they might wait for another day.
Ben, we also know that many of the soldiers over there have been on this go effort, ready to launch with their ground attack, air attack for that matter, at a moment's notice. And having said that, they have to have everything packed up and ready to move on. Where are you sleeping? What are folks doing about that? Are you all hiding out in dugouts, or are you sleeping in a tent?
At this point, we do have tents here at Camp Thunder. It's a little more austere than Camp Victory. That camp was quite established. But right now, people had packed up a lot of their things in preparation for a move. So really, we're just sleeping on cots now without any of the any bags or other things with right now. From what we understand, when we move on, or if they move north, the conditions will get even worse. We cannot expect to have tents right away or running water or any of those sort of things. So it certainly will get harder to just live and do basic day-to-day things.
Ben, when you all do plan to leave that area there with Camp Thunder and heading north into the border area there with Iraq, what are the plans of, I guess, transportation via tank, truck, or other vehicle?
From what we understand, there will be a certain group of troops, not necessarily from the 101st, that will probably go in before the 101st would make it. Of course, the 101st travels by helicopter, and also many of the soldiers will travel by convoy. The problem with that is that this isn't necessarily an area where there are a lot of roads, so that whole travel process can be expected to take a long time. Really, if you look at a map of the Iraq area, you won't see a lot of interstates in particular, and they don't necessarily go anywhere besides Baghdad. So I guess if that's the goal, if that's our end result as far as this battalion is concerned, I guess that's a good thing.
You, with the media, and obviously there are many other journalists out there, would you be traveling right along with the troops as they move in?
Yeah, that's correct. They've sort of been talking to us about how we feel about being this close to the action. And obviously, we've sort of expressed that we'd like to be right up there with them, but maybe not necessarily on the first wave of things. So I really have to say that they've been taking very good care of us. They realize that we're out here with about 1/100th of the training that they get to be here. They're very sensitive of that, and they're doing their best to take care of us.
Ben, obviously for you and for many of the soldiers out there, this is a first time at war. And you were telling us earlier this morning, even in the morning show, how close that this apparent Scud missile of some sort that was flying in through Iraq, there landing in Kuwait, firing there, how close this came to you. It was shot down by a Patriot missile. After that happened, how panicked was everyone? Did everyone remain? I mean, just describe what the troops and you were going through. Obviously, we're having some technical difficulties. Again, we have been talking with Channel 4's Ben Singer, who is with Camp Thunder, the 9th Helicopter Battalion of the 159th Brigade, who is there in Kuwait. He's telling us he's just about an hour from the border of Iraq, and at this time, his unit is basically camping out. They are sitting still. They are not moving. Apparently, they are in near other fire zones because they do know just recently throughout the morning hours, apparently different Scud missiles have been firing and landing near them. So a very close call, but fortunately he does have good news to report. No members of the 159th Brigade injured, and at this point he's hearing no American casualties. We're going to go now back to network coverage.
about ground action, if anything? We're not hearing from our reporters who are embedded, so we presume they're on the move, Jim.
They could be, although it was thought that even there, that some of the assault on Iraqi ground troops in the south would be done in sort of a standoff position, that many of these U.S. forces wouldn't quite be rolling into Iraq quite yet, that they'd continue to pound those Iraqi military units with artillery and perhaps even airstrikes. But at this time, it is unclear to us anyway here at the Pentagon. We're just not getting that kind of detailed vision as to what's going on the ground in the south. It was thought that the air campaign and elements of the ground campaign could begin almost simultaneously, not necessarily a full-blown invasion across the Iraqi border, but certainly even between last night and today, we understand that there were some ground elements, perhaps some special operation forces inside Iraq doing the kinds of things you'd expect them to be doing, surveilling the military, surveying airstrips and possible routes for U.S. troops to take once they do get in on the ground. But it's not clear yet from here that a major ground invasion has begun or will begin soon, Tom.
All right, thanks very much, NBC's Jim Miklaszewski at the Pentagon. It's also worth pointing out that Homeland Security is a major concern now that the war is underway. Connecticut, New Jersey, and New York today formed a combine, as it were, a National Guard, state highway patrolmen, and local police to guard targets of opportunity in this part of America, bridges, tunnels, that kind of thing. Governor Rowland of Connecticut, Governor Pataki of New York, Governor McGreevey of New Jersey holding a joint news conference. There's a place called CENTCOM, which is just outside, just north and west of Doha in the country of Qatar. That's where Tommy Franks, we presume now, is huddled with his senior advisors, talking to the people who are running the command and control center, making the decisions about this war. NBC's Kelly O'Donnell is at CENTCOM, and she has some information for us. Kelly?
Hello, Tom. Yes, Tommy Franks is in his war room, which is separate from the Joint Operations Center, where he gets all of the information from computers and video conferencing and so forth in the field. What I am hearing on this end is similar and may in some ways complement what Jim Miklaszewski is reporting. What I'm being told by multiple sources is that this is not the shock and awe phase of action, and that there is, in fact, a simultaneous ground attack and air assault. As Jim pointed out, it may not be full scale, but yes, in fact, there are ground forces and air forces on the move at the same time. It was also pointed out to me today to look carefully at what Secretary Rumsfeld said in his briefing today, and he said this is pretty close to a quote, that the force, scope, and scale that has never been seen before in referring to the kind of assault. They are telling me that it will be unmistakable, and the kinds of images that are coming in from Baghdad tonight do not meet that threshold. So that's some of the information that we're getting at this point. General Tommy Franks has been working throughout the evening, and it is, of course, nighttime here now, and we are getting some sense that there will be no briefing from this location, perhaps not even tomorrow. We were also told that this level of activity could go on 24, 48 hours, unclear, and that in his communication with the White House that the administration understands that when the military was given the go-ahead to execute this in their own way of determining what was best from a military strategy, that it may take this kind of time. We've also been told that the strategic surprise was so important to General Tommy Franks, and when there was so much discussion of shock and awe, this different kind of approach may in fact play into that. Tom?
All right, thanks very much, NBC's Kelly O'Donnell. One of the major considerations, of course, well, what they're going to do with the refugees, what they're going to do with the humanitarian efforts, which are going to be considerable. There are about 1 million children in Iraq who are malnourished on a daily basis. The United Nations is responsible for feeding about 13 million people a day under the so-called Oil for Food program, in which Saddam Hussein can export some oil. He gets in return food that's distributed to the population. There's an enormous black market that goes on there, but the impression strongly is that the proceeds from that black market goes primarily to the leadership of Saddam Hussein and his family. Otherwise, how could they support those grand palaces, those luxurious places, David?
Well, two of his sons are directly tied to the smuggling for oil, and Qusay's been involved in cigarettes and everything else smuggling. So the black market is clearly an official franchise. You don't enter into it unless you have someone in the inner circle as a partner. So yeah, that's there. I really do worry about both the refugee and the immediate relief issue. You've got a population that's lived under considerable stress for more than a decade. They're going to demand and need medical care and food immediately, and this is known by the forces moving in. And it's going to be a considerable drain on resources as they move ahead, particularly if this turns out to be longer than most of us expect it to be and more violent in urban areas than we hope it to be.
All right, let's go to General Monty Miggs now, who's over at the Telestrator, who's going to tell us about the shape of the battlefield, but also this whole issue about United States ground forces having to become policemen once they get to Baghdad. They're English-speaking Christians in a heavily Muslim country speaking Arabic.
Now, this is a real problem. I'll talk about that. We'll zoom in here and take a look at Iraq and get a sense of the ground, and then we'll talk about this very, very important transition from combat operations to peacekeeping. I put this map up because it's important that people understand the synergy between air and ground and the fact that we have these two no-fly zones here that the Air Force pretty much owns and has owned for a long period of time. So as a ground commander with my soldiers, or they were my soldiers and they were under fire like they were today, I'd want to get them out of those foxholes just as quick as I could. And so this area that we're looking at here may well be very easy to traverse and get in very, very quickly. And remember, we've talked along about the necessity to get across the rivers in a way that the enemy didn't anticipate and gets ahead of his decision cycle. And so what we're going to see, I suspect, is some very quick avenues, attacks up into areas that are strategically important. One of them obviously being the Western Desert. Another one, of course, the area around Baghdad and Tikrit. The quicker you can get there and surprise the enemy with the fact that you're already in his backyard adds to the shock and awe effect. Now, one of the very, very important things that General Wallace, General Abizaid, and General Franks are going to be worrying about is as the forces are coming up, you have to separate the factions. You've got to make sure that the revenge killings and that kind of score settling doesn't take over. You've also got to make sure that as these sites pop up that are suspected to have weapons of mass destruction in them or perhaps nuclear materials, you've immediately got to flex troops out, assess it, and secure it. And at the same time, when you get into the built-up areas after you've had this fighting in the complex terrain, you have to do something we didn't do in Bosnia that we didn't understand, Tom, that goes to your initial point about our type of folks coming in and into a completely different country, a completely different neighborhood. In these countries, the black market is associated in by the secret security services. And it's a very important part of the control of the country. If the peacekeeping effort fails, as was done in the last administration, to attack that as part of establishing good governance, this can be very, very difficult. In fact, some of those remnants remain in Bosnia today, and we just saw the prime minister in Serbia was assassinated, most likely by representatives of this same type of connectivity that exists in Serbia still today.
And Monty, once they get to Baghdad, will they be bringing in MP kinds of forces, reservists who are trained specifically to do that, or are they going to have to put the combat people into those jobs?
With the amount, it's hard to know right now, but with the amount of troops we see on the ground at this point, the MP brigades are certainly going to be involved in that because they do have this law enforcement capability and they're trained for it. Civil affairs is going to be there, and I'm sure you'll see a lot of National Guard and Reserve civil affairs, and they will change the task organization to allow the combat soldiers to address this kind of problem. But one of the things we learned in Bosnia, when you have some bad actors, the way you face them down is you confront them with overwhelming force and they back off, you don't have a firefight.
All right, thanks very much, General Monty Miggs. A Navy veteran who is now the chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee, a longtime Republican power in the United States Senate, joins us now. Senator John Warner of Virginia, who was out in that region not so long ago assessing American preparation and force readiness. General Warner, what's your assessment of what we have heard from administration officials so far and what you're seeing on your television screen?
First, Tom, it's Petty Officer Third Class Warner, World War II veteran, people you wrote about so brilliantly. And let me tell you, these troops today are every bit as good as anyone that ever served in uniform in the United States, even a little bit better in my judgment. So we're here in the Congress going about our business, but right now I'm leaving to go to the floor to work with the majority leader and indeed the Democratic leader in managing the debate on an important resolution where the Congress recites its steadfast support for the Commander-in-Chief, our President, the men and women of the armed forces, their families, and I might add, a number of civilians, most in federal service, who are in harm's way taking the risks in this cause to liberate Iraq.
Senator, we did have Senator Daschle on just a few moments ago. He's the Democratic leader who said earlier that he had been disappointed by the failure of the diplomatic effort. Overnight, he issued a very strong statement in support of the troops. But after his initial speech, there was some very sharp criticism of him by Republican Party officials in the House of Representatives, even within the administration. Do you think that that kind of acrimonious debate will now go away?
Tom, it's a matter of history. Working this morning with the Majority Leader Frist, we decided in the conduct of this debate that is history. At the moment, I hope all 100 United States senators unite on this resolution. We worked it in consultation with Senator Daschle and the Democrats, Senator Levin, my counterpart on the Armed Services Committee, and I'm very optimistic that this important statement will reflect unity in the Senate of the United States.
I hesitate to bring it up at a time like this, but there is going to be a dollars and cents issue as well, and I know that that was on the floor of the Senate today. Some members of your party, as well as a number of Democrats, are complaining that they're not hearing enough about the cost estimates from the administration.
Yes. In meeting with defense officials, we anticipate next week the administration will submit a supplemental request to cover the operational costs that we foresee. And next week, they should be spreading before the American public a clear factual case as best we can make the estimates for those costs.
All right. Thanks very much, Senator
Thank
John
you.
Warner of Virginia, chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee, a veteran of World War II, former Navy Secretary. Let's go to the White House now. NBC's David Gregory. David.
Tom, we'll hear from the president in about 15 minutes. He will be meeting with members of his cabinet and will talk to reporters in a pool situation and a limited amount of reporters. White House officials telling us that the purpose of this is to rally the troops, both the troops within the administration and, of course, the American public. Officials have been saying that the president would not speak in a sort of minute-by-minute assessment of how the war is going. He wants to frame the issues as he did last night, but he wants to make it clear as he discusses the conduct of the war with his cabinet that there are other areas to focus on. Domestic matters, homeland security, and it's a message that he'll emphasize to the public as well. One other point, in the past hour, Tom, officials have been stressing to me that part of what we're seeing in the middle of a lull over Baghdad at the moment is very much part of a theme, a sort of punch and stand back, surgical strikes. You heard Ari Fleischer in his briefing say something that was very important and something that officials are stressing, and that is that they would still accept Saddam Hussein to go into exile. You heard a similar point from Secretary of Defense Rumsfeld. They want to use enough military force to make the point that Iraq should give up the fight, should totally give up, or else the war will get harder and harder on Iraq. Tom.
All right, thanks very much, NBC's David Gregory. As he reported, we will be hearing from the president before too long in what is a pool arrangement. That is, several representatives of the very large White House press corps will go into the Oval Office with cameras rolling. The president will have something to say at that time. Whether he'll take questions, we still don't know. He does have a cabinet meeting scheduled for 2:30 today. He was awakened at 6 o'clock this morning by Condi Rice, his national security advisor, to give him an update on what happened overnight. They are still trying to assess whether or not they got Saddam Hussein. The evidence, at least to those people who are looking in, does appear that they did not. But he does have body doubles, and in fact, the CIA is continuing to try to get a recording of his voice from earlier and then match it against the recording from last night. We're going to have continuing coverage here. I want to remind you that it is now coming up on 10 o'clock at night in Baghdad. About an hour ago, there was a lot of activity in the skies over Baghdad, and obviously American air attacks were successful on several key buildings, information installations, security leadership positions, the former office of Tariq Aziz, and now there is a pause. This is obviously a new kind of air campaign, as General Monty Meigs has been quick to point out and to emphasize that it's not just a fireworks show. It's designed to paralyze the leadership, to strike right at the nervous system at the very top of the Iraqi leadership, to give a pause and then to come back again with another wave of attacks that probably will be surgical the second time around as well. General Short, would you agree with that?
Tom, I do, and I think it's important to understand that in that pause, we're trying to assess. We don't want to go out and just blow things up, as you pointed out. We'd like to know how we did in the first wave. Do we need to reattack, or can we move to a second set of targets? So we're looking to get information from our overhead satellites, probably from Predator or Global Hawk vehicles, and from the pilots themselves. I've never met a fighter pilot who didn't think he hit his target, but we're asking for an honest assessment. Do you think you got it or not? Do we need to reattack or not?
Okay. Well, we want to tell you now that it's 2 o'clock in the eastern United States. It is 10 p.m. in Baghdad, and the people there are waiting for what they are sure to realize is more to come. They've been through 2 wars before, a long, costly war with Iraq, the invasion of Kuwait, Operation Desert Storm, and now a war that's coming right to their doorsteps. It is nighttime in Baghdad. The first stage of the air and ground war of Operation Iraqi Freedom is underway officially. This is the view from Baghdad with the skies lit up, the flash of explosions. 3 separate sites in that city appear to be burning. The bombing is expected to continue for several hours. Combat is intensifying as well along the Iraqi-Kuwaiti border. The U.S. 3rd Infantry Division has unleashed a barrage of artillery fire on Iraqi troops. There are reports of as many as 4 oil fires burning in southern Iraq. Presumably, they were set deliberately. There's also the intriguing question of whether it was indeed Saddam or a stand-in who appeared on Iraqi television just a few hours after yesterday's missile strike on a senior leadership bunker in Baghdad. Was Saddam killed or wounded? What about his sons Uday and Qusay? That, along with the tape, still is being analyzed at this hour. It's also worth pointing out that Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld, at about 11:15 this morning, came out to say that the war is underway, and then made a very strong statement to Iraqi military leaders and to the Iraqi people